Starting lineup: Darius, Yi, Lady C, Fortune, Milio up against Nasus, Viego, Yone, Jinx, Lux. Rating of the picks for a lower ranked game: Darius as a top 7, Yi in the jungle 6, Lady C as a mid 8, Fortune as a shooter 7, Milio in support 5, Nasus as a top. We're gonna bump Nasus up or the lower ranked as a top from a 7 to an 8. So that's an 8 for Nasus as a top. Viego in the jungle 6, Yone as a mid 7, Lux in support 6. This game definitely a must watch if you love to see me miss time after time. Going to open up with a ton of missed skill shots. We have here in this game this Darius player who is going to cause a ton of chaos. And what's interesting in this one is that we have a Gray player as well, which was most definitely not allowed in ranked back when I first started. You have to kind of wonder after a while what has to be done to separate myself in any way from a complete Gray rank player who has around a total of 50 games played. Definitely a thing unique to League that we're heaping guys like this in with guys like this. A game with, despite everything, a beautiful flow to it. Moving on. Going to kick it off with this Fortune player, seems like a very young boy. Going to attack this mid in the pings in the first minute over supposedly not acting right. Don't ever do that. It's a very stupid thing to do to start beefing with a teammate 1 minute in. For a while, the skirmish in the mid with little outcome. Eventually, you're going to have Viego visiting Nasus to help out in the top lane. This Yone player going to survive by the skin of his teeth a couple of times, and this could have gone very poorly. This Darius caught in the web of his own lack of patience. One of the 3 beginner rules: the turret is undefeated. This Nas is gonna end up opting not to heal at the fountain in between kills, something that I would not recommend. Especially if you have your teleport summoner spell up. Really a completely unnecessary risk. Nasus is a powerful tank whose abilities focus on sustain and late game power. He aims to dominate in the late stages of the game. That passive of Nasus, Soul Eater, gain lifesteal based on your attack damage. This is key to his late game sustain. You heal up with those auto attacks, and that is especially useful as you begin stacking your siphoning strike. You add that damage over time. Trying to buff some of that very early game frailty and uselessness by teleporting and joining up. But it's a hit and miss situation with placing these mines. And one of the dirtiest things about League is really that the rules are vague when it comes to what pixel you can hit at what point. For instance, when you're talking about Lux or Morgana, and you're really not standing near the blast radius of their spells, you're still gonna get hit by them. It is perfectly possible to stand next to the damaging beam laser from Lux and still take damage from it. It is damage by association. These mines from Jinx are the complete opposite. Meaning that arbitrarily they decided that if the exact pixel doesn't hit the exact character, you will not trigger the mine effect. You learn over time which abilities come true for you and which ones don't. And these jinxed mines, the third spell, is really a perfect example of just underwhelming 100% of the time. It is really sad to say, but it's true. It's frequently better to pretend like you don't have that spell and just spam the stun pistol instead non-stop. I would say so far in my Jinx journey, definitely my biggest disappointment in Jinx. I imagine that if I would have gone with Kog'Maw or Draven or some such, that I would have never had that experience of having what is essentially a non-functioning spell on my bar. And in general, just trying all sorts of bizarre things here, and there's probably a reason why so few mid-mages fight in the position next to the chickens. It's probably because it doesn't regularly work, and you get the same exact outcome here. Later on, with the use of the ult as a nuke, Yone will go down. At level 11, even with basic plating because of the health scaling of Nasus, you enter this kind of domain that many players deeply despise, where the health wall just freezes you up. Young players especially get nervous because you never get to pad your stats that way. We have Yone with a lot of Infinity Edge put together, that wild burst so I come too late. I end up returning to my duties in the bottom lane, but the jungler spots me and uses his ult. I think what made this game stand out is that you can't really end up with more clumsy play. I missed nearly every ult. I awkwardly teleported in way too late. I was completely scrambled, had to backpedal. And yet actually I will end up doing very well in this game. So out of all the Jinx games so far, this is probably the one that means the most to me on a personal level, in the sense that I've now seen Jinx deliver with a horrible setup. Atrocious luck, deeply awkward, and still made it. And when things can work out under those circumstances, it creates a lot of trust. Yone, Way of the Hunter, crit chance is doubled, but he deals a bit less damage from crits. You have that beautiful iconic Mortal Steel, the 3-part combo, thrusting forward, dashing, and then eventually knocking up enemies, and just bursting down like crazy here. You get this struggle in the bottom lane. Yone wants to pitch in, doesn't have teleport, has to walk all the way over. We're gonna end up with Yone diving under a turret, and I'm going to benefit from some of that AoE from Super Mega Death Rocket, which I've had many misses on in this game. To a Yone player, getting that blowback from the turret is just a constant. Yone and Warwick in lower tier play, the two most famous turret divers, known for fighting directly underneath turrets, though Yone has a tool for it. And with Warwick, it is just really more a cultural thing. There's no particular reason why he would be good at pulling out. We have what can only really be described as a total panic in the top lane, as this Yi and this Darius are going to converge in something that is rather shameful and entirely double team this Nasus who's going to pour it in, and Nasus wrecks them like something out of a movie, like the Return of the Mummy or something that I would never watch. This Nasus, an upbeat, constructive personality with a lot of understanding. Finally, a good example of how mastery can actually help you. It's been about time. This Yi and this Darius the complete opposite of that. This Yi good-natured but with very little understanding. This Darius bad-natured and with no understanding whatsoever. And if you have no idea what your strengths are, it's going to be impossible to play to them. By the way, I'm not saying that in any kind of offensive manner. Anybody who looks at the history or the play of this Darius and Yi would come away with the exact same conclusion. You're just still figuring out how the character is put together, and you can tell from every interaction you take and make. Coming to this Lux's rescue, the kind of person I am. Gotta get the pings. The 24,000 miss of the Super Mega Death Rocket, because this was not a pretty game. It had a pretty outcome, but it wasn't a pretty game. Lots of misses, lots of unintended consequences, very poor coordination, nervousness, end up in a team fight. This Yi not that much in his kit, so all he can really do is stand and fight. I'm gonna end up switching to fish bones, get that AoE. Eventually, this Nasus opens up to surprising burst damage. In the end, with all the farming that he's been able to do, in a 1v1, this Yone is easily going to beat out this Yi, which is a real problem for you. 27 minutes in, as a Yi hyper carry. Doing some direct facing off against Darius later as well. In what is really just a health and DPS shootout, with very little maneuvering. If I had to generalize the team synergy in this game, I would have to say Team Blue a B, but largely because I'm trying to open up my mind about cliche picks like a Yi. In a way, the picks were very traditional. Darius on the aggressive side, but a cliche. Yi a cliche. Lady C, difficult but a cliche. Fortune a cliche. This team could have worked. It's a B. If I had to say it for the red side, I would have to say a B. For one thing, you only really have the reliable magic damage output from this Lux, who in this case is going to end up failing in dealing damage. There's a lot of similarities between Yone and Jinx in terms of DPS, and then this Viego is highly situational. So you land on a B for the team. Diving into the behavior of the individual players here. This Darius with a ruby diamond for honor. Absolutely demoralizing, and we're really taking the hatchet to the whole honor system because it just doesn't work. This Darius by far the most toxic and dysfunctional player in this game. Going to constantly give orders and then contradict himself. Going to constantly take pleasure in having his teammates die. And laughing at them in the chat and in the pings. Wanted to tap out and give up after the first turret was gone, never had any intention of synergizing with this Darius or making it work. An easy C. This Yi, we were going to give a B because you can tell that he was struggling and somewhat constructive, but I'm gonna have to give him a C too now that I have his record before me and I can tell that he's gray rank. So in other words, you didn't even practice before you joined this game and just thanked your whole team. This Lady C, an A, by far the most constructive player on Team Blue. This Fortune, a B, feminized, toxic, but functional. This Milio, a B. What is it with Milio, man? This Nasus, an A. Easily one of the best players in this game, constantly a constructive attitude, seemed to be very upbeat. This Viego AB, you tried and you participated. This Yone AB, almost an A. It seemed like at times you were going completely solo, but I cannot hate on your performance. This Lux, an A. I don't per se know why you're playing DPS, Lux. You don't really resonate with it at all, but you were absurdly patient the entire game to the point where I really had to go back, and I was surprised that you weren't pissed off more. Revisiting in a bit more depth, this Darius, you went 5 and 13. You died from rage and anger. Too many mobility-focused items with this Darius and just copy-pasting it from the internet without thinking. What was really the most obscene is that you constantly commanded your teammates to die in the top lane, and then you just randomly abandoned them. This Yi going 1 and 9, from what I can tell you added AP items. Yi is not an AP champion. This Lady C, you went 5 and 9. You're going Leandry, always good. But too much mana here. When you're dying 9 times, you don't need to worry about adding mana. It's a typical pattern of just having this fixated ID beforehand, and even when you're dying a ton of times, you're just sticking to it, in the hopes that it will save you. It won't save you. You get this Fortune. I could pretend to hate on your build, but it wouldn't be genuine. You went Ionian, Yomu, the Collector, probably added Bloodthirster slightly too early. But this is a really good build. You went 5 and 3. You knew very well what you were doing. Your problem is just with your personality. You have this Beeswax guy going 0 and 4. Which, man, what is behind the Beeswax guy? Like, why? Just why? He doesn't give good shielding, he doesn't give good healing. It's just one of those champs where I can't believe that anybody's legitimately playing them unironically. You have this Nasus, whose player name is kind of verging on a dad joke in Dutch. Probably an older person, kind of intentionally trying to avoid playing with homecoming kids here during the day. We have this Viego. You went 8 and 7. You have a good tactical ID. Viego is extremely hard to play, bordering on pointless and insane. You did add Ruined King. You should know as an item that Ruined King does not synergize well with Viego. This is because Viego already inherently has some of the effect of the Ruined King on him, since he was literally, in the lore, the Ruined King himself. In case you didn't know that, the Ruined King obviously comes from Viego. He himself is the Ruined King. So if you add the item to him, the Ruined King, you're only going to add the same effect over again that he already has. We have this Yone, 7 and 3, way too much jungle farming there at some point. Every Italian that we've come across so far has a 1v9 mentality, but we have to be honest and say, you knew your business very well. Then we have this Lux, you went 1 and 2 and 13. You built pure DPS items, but you played entirely submissively. You really have to look into other champions because this DPS sniping, kill sniping on Lux in a support role is really not your thing. You really have the attitude of a real support player. You just have none of the stuff that comes along with it. I was surprised how constructive you were. You were one of the most constructive people and one of the most helpful people that we've seen in a long time. You basically made a thing out of it of absorbing the hits for other people and setting up kills for other people. It's something you see very, very, very rarely. All in all, you get a lot of trust from these kinds of games. When you really look at the gameplay itself, it's a complete mess. When you look at my stats, you see 8, 2, and 10 and a complete victory. So many misses here, so much clumsy nonsense here, and it brings a lot of trust because if this is what I can do with Jinx when everything goes wrong, imagine what would be possible if everything went right. Really a feeling that I didn't think I would have. This was a good one. Very energetic. Taking a look at the scoreboard here, your items and your playstyle is not at all in sync, and that will harm literally anyone. In fact, that is kind of a bit of a stereotype of what you should precisely not do if you do not want to self-harm. Break through the dogma and drop this, and you will be better for it. If you can replace that with like Phantom Dancer. We have here Trinity, Spirit Visage, Thornmail, Frozen Heart. You're really demonstrating here that especially with the most simplistic characters like Volibear or Nasus, the importance of itemization decreases. And then especially since armor is so unbelievably scarce in any group, just slapping anything at all on will already make you special. This is definitely a winning formula for most groups. Whether this is a winning formula when your matchup is Darius and you're going up against Yi, also Lady C, Fortune, and Beeswax Guy, I would think this is highly dubious here. And winning in League can really not get more straightforward and simplistic than this. By itself, you have to be happy that it gets rewarded. The concept is just Nasus is great at collecting a bunch of health and growing into a health ball, and then you simply put some plating on it in the most straightforward way, with the Spirit Visage that is slowly turning into a cult item. No idea whatsoever why people religiously prefer this over Koenig. To me, it seems overtly worse in every possible way. But whatever. As long as you have that plating on top of that massive health pool, it's probably a winning formula, and it's probably been a winning formula for this player for a very long time. More people should think like that. Moving on.